Herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge von Build Up. Heute begrüße ich meinen Gast Stuart Maggs. Er ist Gründer und CEO von Scaled Robotics. Die in Barcelona ansässige Firma digitalisiert mit Hilfe von auf Roboter installierten 3D-Scannern Gebäude von innen. Das heißt, die Roboter fahren während des Bauprozesses durch die Gebäude und erstellen so 3D-Modelle. Damit können Abweichungen zwischen dem virtuellen Modell und dem gescannten Modell ermittelt werden. Scaled Robotics versucht somit, die Baubranche zu digitalisieren, den Bauprozess zu analysieren und damit zu optimieren. Ich habe mit Stuart in diesem heute auf Englisch stattfindenden Interview gesprochen über die Phase der Gründung, wie er aus einem Projekt, das im Rahmen seines Masterstudiums stattgefunden hat, die Firma gegründet wurde, über die Lösung, die Scaled Robotics anbietet und die aktuelle sowie zukünftigen Herausforderungen der Baubranche. Ich wünsche euch viel Spaß beim Zuhören. Welcome to another episode of Build Up. Today I welcome my guest Stuart Maggs, who is co-founder and CEO of Scaled Robotics. Hi, Stuart.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Maybe you just introduce yourself briefly and then we can start talking.
So, as introduced, Stuart Maggs, CEO and co-founder of Scaled Robotics. I used to be an architect by training, but my career kind of took a little bit of a left turn and I founded a construction robotics / AI company, which is focused on digitizing construction and moving it from a manual skills-based process into a leaner manufacturing process of the future.
Yeah. So just bringing construction industry into the future a little bit more and faster than it goes right now.
Maybe not even for the future, just bringing it into the present.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody else is already in the digital time. Yeah. So you said you're an architect originally. So you've been studying architecture in the UK, or how did your path go?
So I did my bachelor's in the UK in a university called Plymouth. So a little shout out to Plymouth University.
Okay.
Then I graduated from there and I ended up working. My first job was in Italy, ironically, in the south of Italy. So I ended up living like 7 months in Italy for my first job, which was completely insane. Like everything there was mad.
Did you speak any Italian or?
No.
Okay.
And the town where I lived, they didn't speak any English.
Yeah.
So you pick up a little Italian, a little bit of the gestures, and it was okay.
Then you can at least order some food and
food and coffee.
Yeah.
But the food was amazing.
Yeah, I guess that. Yeah.
We used to, I'm ashamed to say, but we had pizza like every day. Yeah. I must have put on so much weight over that time.
I mean, if you get the perfect pizza, why not enjoy it, right, every day? Okay.
Exactly.
And then you moved on after being in Italy.
So the guy that was my boss in Italy, he went to a university to do his master's in Barcelona called IAC, which is a really contemporary school.
Yeah.
So the next step is I ended up doing it. I got another job in the Netherlands because I was convinced that the Netherlands was the best place for architecture. Mm-hmm. You had OMA, you had MVRDV. I was a massive fanboy of these Dutch architects. I thought they were amazing. So I was determined to get a job in the Netherlands, but I didn't apply for any of the firms that I really admired because I thought they'd reject me.
Just start a little lower and then work your way up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I worked there for a little while, did some really cool projects, a company called Denkkamer, which means think chamber in Dutch. Okay. And then I decided I needed to upskill myself, and I ended up going to the university that my former boss had graduated from, which was in Barcelona, which was called IAC, the Institute of Advanced Architecture of Catalonia. And that's where it wasn't really architecture. It was kind of at the intersection of computer science, of robotics, of art,
Okay.
It was really a mixture of so many different things that it kind of gave me a completely different perspective into the industry.
But that's then for university, that's pretty state of the art, right? Because as far as I know, many universities and are like very outdated and just teach old stuff, and so that's very unique, right?
It's a really strange school. It is
Okay.
completely unique, and they really gave you the confidence that doing these kind of new, funky, weird things actually had a value and had a place. And they gave us a lot of freedom to experiment, like things that they would have. Like I remember in my bachelor's, I had these ideas about buildings that were made of trees. I was like convinced that in the future we would grow buildings because buildings would slowly become more like organisms than they are these kind of really static things. So I was like, why can't we redistribute resources like an animal does? And I had this, and they laughed me out of the class. They thought it was the dumbest idea. And at this school, they encouraged you and said, you know what, think it through, move it through to the end, and maybe it's not a terrible idea. But they gave you the confidence to be creative.
So it's like actually having this startup culture implemented into the school to like not just like bringing people to learn the regular architecture and build buildings like we always had them, but to just grow new ideas and let people their freedom to just get those ideas and develop them further until they might even get to something that's really working, right?
Exactly. Like the first project that really captured my imagination with robotics was we put a chainsaw on a 6-axis robot arm, and we got these logwood from the hills behind Barcelona, and we wanted to cut them with these really precise joints.
Okay.
And we wanted to build. It started off as a shelter for horses, and then it got like smaller and smaller and smaller until it was like some weird structures. But the fact that they gave us the opportunity to do something was incredibly
That's
dangerous.
awesome. That's yeah.
But we got to play with this huge 6-axis arm, a chainsaw. We built these cool structures, this logwood, and I was like, I want to do more of this.
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
awesome.
I mean, it's really motivating you to have another ideas and go further with your thinking, because I mean, if you have an idea and 3 people laugh at you and say, that doesn't make any sense, just do it like we always did, then I mean, after 2 or 3 times you tried it, you'll just shut down and just leave it how it is. And with encouraging people, that's an awesome way of teaching at a university, I think.
I think one of the biggest problems the industry has is also, I mean, we'll get into it later, I guess, but it's more of a mentality. Like the industry doesn't want to really change. People are happy to do things the way they've been done for generations. And you get these conversations time and time again of like, why do something new? And it's working, it's fine. But a university like this, they question and say, no, there are big challenges in the world. We have a climate emergency on our hands. We have a refugee crisis. We have all of these social pains that construction and architecture can play a role in.
Yeah.
So why don't we be creative and come up with new solutions? But they empower the students to be able to do that. I think it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, that's awesome. But did you knew before going there because you had that connection of your former boss, or was it just you knew it's a good university and just went there, or did you really know, okay, it's like that and that's exactly why you choose it?
I think so. I've been following them online for a long time, like checking out the blog. So I kind of knew what it was, but then you don't really know until you actually go. And then also you get exposed to different things. And I think when I went to university, I had the intention to go back and work in the Netherlands as an architect. And then when I left the university, I had a completely different idea about the trajectory of my career. And I probably wouldn't be in this position without that experience. I would probably just be a regular architect somewhere. I'm sure in a nice office, but it wouldn't be what I'm doing now.
Yeah. So was it like always your dream to be an architect? Like you said, you were a fanboy of those big architects in the Netherlands. So was it like a dream that you always had, being in this industry, building houses and structures?
Not really. I mean, so I remember when I was in school, I had 2 choices at the end of like when you get to choose universities. So one side, I was terrible at math. I was so bad at math at school. But I had two choices. I could do fine art, and I got an unconditional place to study fine art in London at a really good school. Or I could go and do architecture. And I decided that I had a couple of friends that were doing that course. I took a gap year, so I went traveling. And I was like, oh, I don't think I'm cut out to be an artist. I don't think this is good. But I was always obsessed with technology. I was always obsessed with, I've always been interested in politics, in social issues, and architecture always seemed to be at the intersection of a lot of different interests. So it's kind of flexible to meet your needs. But that's kind of how I fell into it. But it was probably more luck than judgment.
Yeah. That's one important point that I think in every career plays an important role, to have some luck at points in time to be at the right place, right? So that was Barcelona for you then, I guess, right?
Yeah, those weird little inflection points.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was 1 month away from becoming a photojournalist, because I entered my career right in the moment of the crisis, and I was competing against people that had 10 years more experience with me for the same job. So I was working, I didn't have any money. I had to work in a shop. So I worked in a shop while I made my portfolio to get my first job. By the way, hated working in a shop. I did not enjoy this. But I worked in the shop, and I said to myself, if I don't get an offer from an architectural firm, I'm just going to do something completely left field. And I saved up a whole bunch of money, and I was going to buy some camera gear, and I decided I was going to become a photojournalist.
Okay.
My dad hated this idea.
Yeah. Not going to university and doing something totally different. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I set myself a deadline by Christmas, and then 1 month before I got the job offer. So
okay.
I don't know. Who
Perfect
knows
timing.
what could happen?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So did you always had those entrepreneurial tendencies, like getting stuff started, or was it like something completely new and not really planned, starting a company then off from university?
I'm not sure. I think I always wanted to do these kinds of things, but I never thought that it was going to be me doing it or making it happen. And honestly, so when I left my master's, and I decided that I was determined that I was going to turn what I'd learned in university, and in particular one project, which was mini builders. I wanted to turn this idea from academia into reality. And honestly, most people told me that, no, this isn't going to work. You don't have the knowledge, you don't have the experience. How are you going to do this? And honestly, they were completely right. It was a mountain of things to learn. But there was just a handful of enough people that were kind of positive that made it a reality. I don't know if I had an entrepreneurial spirit, but I guess I was just determined to achieve a few things.
Yeah, but I think you kind of must have it, because even if so many people were negative on you, you still said, okay, I'll do it and I'll try it. Because I think that's almost always the case, that you're starting something, you never know really all of what you actually would need to know to start it, right? It's always a little bit of try and error, and just start, and because you don't know all the stuff beforehand that you need to know. Okay, so how did the process of starting Scaled Robotics then go? You talked about mini robots or mini robotics. That was a project from university, or?
I think the genesis of a lot of the stuff that we're doing at the company came from this project that was happening on my master's course, which was kind of like a mini startup in itself, where we did this final thesis project for the master's. And we had, I think, 4 or 5 months to produce this project, which is insane. And we, instead of doing it individually, we got together into a group of, I think it was 5 or 6 of us. And we set ourselves the target of building a family of robots that could autonomously build a structure larger than themselves. And the reason that was important was because all of the work that had been done at that point in academia was using these big 6-axis arms, which weigh 2 tons, and are completely unscalable for construction. And the reason they're unscalable is they can only build things within the envelope of what the arm can reach. And construction is huge. So you need a mobile device to be able to build things larger than the machine itself. So it needs to be a scalable solution. So we did this project called Mini Builders, which aimed to take on that problem. And we secured funding. There was some really great guys that helped us with that. We got a film crew. One of the guys knew some people in Moscow that organized that. So they made like a mini documentary about what we were doing. It was incredibly stressful. But then that project ended. It was really cool. We got lots of publicity. It also made me feel like, oh, maybe it's possible to build something here. I mean, if Wired and TechCrunch are taking notice of us, maybe it's worth something. And then from that, it was, okay, is it possible to take something that worked in academia, that made a nice paper, and turn it into a business? Because I was a bit sick of doing things for the clicks on the internet that would go on a design blog and look great, but wouldn't actually make any real change in the world. And that was what I wasn't doing it because it was like fun and cool to put on a blog. So it was really the question, how do you turn this into a business? And that's when it gets significantly more complicated, because then you realize how little you know even about your own industry. Like what I know now compared to what I knew when we first started. Wow, I was so naive.
Maybe sometimes it's a good thing, because maybe if you would have known, you wouldn't even have started, because you know all the stuff, you know?
100%. It empowers you. That naivety really does empower you. It's true.
So the group you worked with for your master's then, or for the project, was it all architects, or was it like also computer scientists and other people that had like more knowledge maybe on robotics, on programming and stuff like that?
So we were all architects, which kind of tells you something about the technical outcome will always be limited. And it was one of the biggest lessons that I learned within that period. I knew that if this was to become a reality in the world, then I had to make sure that it had to be a multidisciplinary team to make this a reality. So without roboticists and computer scientists, this was never, ever going to work.
Okay, and then you teamed up with other guys that have more the technical skills. And how did you accomplish this, like getting together a team, or how did the formation process of the founding team take place?
So just slightly before that, with kind of another set of people, we ended up applying for something called the YC, which is the Y Combinator in San Francisco. It's one of the world's best startup incubators. Really impressive track record, some incredible people there. And we got a 3-minute interview. They flew us across to San Francisco for an interview.
Nice, okay.
And you do like a 3 or 5 minute interview. It's incredibly stressful. With some very intimidating people. And then the short story is we got rejected. And you get that rejection email and your heart drops and you think, like, what do they know? They don't know anything.
Out of 3 minutes, what can they judge on your project and stuff?
But they were completely right. Like, all the criticism was completely right, and it was a big lesson learned. And it was that point where that kind of really sunk in, that I started talking to who is my co-founder now, Bharat, who was doing his PhD at USC in California. And we started talking about, initially it was just friends kind of throwing around ideas, and then it slowly kind of cemented itself into, okay, why not? Why don't we stop talking about this, and why do we not just join forces and turn this into a real business? And then simultaneously kind of trying to raise money. And then, that whole process of how do you turn something from just an idea into something that can be executed, but then also has a genuine business proposition. This alone is quite complex to be able to put together.
So you started with like collecting fundings and raising capital to just start off, and then afterwards you hired more people to develop the robot and so on?
Essentially, yeah. It was a kind of a chicken and egg problem that you need things to show investors to prove that you can build this, but you need money to build the things to do. So it was, and then people are looking at you like you've never run a company before. You're a 25, 6-year-old idiot. like, why should I give you all this money?
Yeah.
And we were asking for quite a lot of money, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of a difficult process.
In what year are we now with the trying to find investors?
I think this was like 4 years ago, maybe.
Okay, so 2016 maybe.
Yeah, something
Okay.
like this.
And but you had the robot you built in the university project, which you could like show as a prototype, or did you further develop something that you were showing to, or what was the idea back then? Was it the same thing you are actually doing right now, or was it kind of different? Because usually most times I heard things that change. They had some idea, but then from customers, from investors, the different input came in, and the originally idea maybe changed to something that's actually working better for the market or something.
So we definitely leveraged all the publicity that we got from that university project.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, that was kind of a big difference between like having literally nothing and having a track record in actually producing something in academia. And then, I mean, I would love to tell you that we had one great idea and then just execute on that idea and everything worked perfectly. But it was probably, when we started, it was closer to the original university project.
Mm-hmm.
Then things evolved and we learned our lesson, and we realized we were trying to probably do too much with too little money, and we needed to focus. And I have to really say that our initial investor, Perry, a German formwork and scaffolding company, supported us the entire way. They were incredible at this. They supported the journey, they supported the learning, and they made it possible to have achieved this success so far by allowing us to not be super rigid of, you promised us this as investors, why? And then we said, look, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And they were fantastic in helping us move towards something that was really working.
And how did you find Perry as an investor? Was it like just cold calling, or was it through some investing, I don't know, company, or how was it going on?
I believe they actually reached out to us for a conversation.
Okay.
And that was initially a guy called Frank Ilg, really nice guy, runs their innovation team, is ruthlessly innovative. I don't know how else to describe Frank. And they reached out to us, but it took a while to convince them. I mean, they're a big kind of traditional company. It took a while to convince them that they needed to believe in us, basically.
Yeah.
So it took a long time to get that deal to completion, basically.
So just a lot of meetings and discussions, talking about the project, get to know each other. I mean, that's, if you invest a lot of money, you at least want to know what the people are and how they are and what they're going to do, right? And so Perry is still one of your key investors and partners in this, right? And
Yep.
Perry is itself very innovational, right? They did their first house printed with like the concrete printing technology and stuff. So they are also interested in innovating, I think, right?
You can trace that project back to Frank as well. It was his team that brought that through. Perry are fantastic on that front. They're prepared to invest in innovation. They're not shy about it. They're a forward-thinking, surprisingly young company. They're a family business, and you can feel that in the way that they do business. And I think it gives them kind of a little bit of an edge on maybe some other companies within the space.
Yeah, it's not like the thinking from one quarter to the next and just having good numbers, but really wanting to be existent maybe in 10, 20, 30, 50 years. Yeah. I think that's one big advantage of family-owned businesses.
Exactly, because they've been around so long, they look at the arc of time in a totally different way. And I think this is one of the biggest advantages that we had in having them as an initial investor. Maybe a traditional venture capitalist would be like, look, where's my return in 2 years? And Perry looks at it and says, we can play a little bit more of a long game. We're not really in this to maybe make a huge killing at the end. We want to have a foot in the future.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's bringing the value to us. And having their support over the last couple of years has been super valuable.
Yeah, and they know the construction industry. They know you cannot pull something off and have it established in every project 2 years later or something. They know it just takes time, and so I think they're a very good partner here. Yeah. So okay, maybe you can tell us something on what Scaled Robotics is actually doing with the robots they have, and what's the general idea of Scaled Robotics.
So at the core of what we're trying to do is we want to automate progress monitoring and quality control for construction. Essentially, this is down to the fact that you're trying to coordinate probably hundreds of thousands of elements on a building in time and space, in the cold and the rain, and we're just human beings. And it is incredibly difficult to manage a project. And what we're doing now is we're probably going out manually and we're just pointing at things and going, yeah, it looks okay, that looks all right, that doesn't look bad. Or you want to know all the ducts are 2 meters above the ground. You take a stick of 2 meters and you walk around. I mean, it's like crazy stuff. But it's that disconnection between the digital world and the physical world that creates a huge amount of risk and uncertainty within project delivery. So what we want to do is we want to bridge the gap between the digital world and the physical world to be able to automate progress monitoring and quality control to give site teams better control over critical variables. And our product has kind of 2 components to that. There's capturing data on the construction site. We can do that in 2 ways. One is with the robot, which gives you the autonomy that the robot will drive around, generate these 3D maps of the environment as it goes, and then upload those 3D maps to our cloud. I would also mention that we can also use terrestrial laser scanners, like the Leica RTC 360, for example. So we're not completely married to the robot, but the robot gives you that advantage of autonomy. So when everyone's gone home, you put the robot down and it will map everything out overnight. And you go, cool, all my data is captured. And you know that that is the state of my site at the end of the day. But at that point, regardless of where the data's come from, whether it's the robot or a traditional laser scanner, it's just data. It's just raw data, which is completely useless, like gigabytes of totally useless, but wonderful information. So the second component, which I think is probably the core of what we're doing, is an AI-powered cloud-based software platform. So all of that data, regardless of where it comes from, gets uploaded into the cloud. We take the BIM file and we take the raw point cloud data. We compare the 2 automatically using computer vision and machine learning. And we automatically classify every single element in the model. So we take every single element and we tell you whether it's missing, deviated, verified. We just don't have enough information. So basically, has it been installed, and has it been installed to the quality that you have said that it should be? Is it plus or minus 10 mil, plus or minus 20 mil? And then within the software platform, you can search for all that information. So for example, we did a project recently on a data center where we took 22,000 elements. We processed that within 24 hours and delivered back that analysis so that they could see the top 10% of issues that they needed to focus their attention on to be able to keep their project running smoothly.
But are you transferring those, like it's a point cloud, I guess, and are you transferring this to objects then? So if there's a steel girder or something, is it now a steel girder, or is it just like points in the cloud, and through the BIM model it knows, okay, that's the girder that needs to be there, so the points are where they need to be, so we know it's in place?
So there's no one magic solution to all of this. Once that point cloud comes into our system and the model, it's going to run through a variety of different checks and different algorithms to be able to give this output. And one of them is to recognize whether it's a beam or not, and know whether it's in the right position or not. If that beam is 10 meters out of the place that it needs to be, it's probably quite likely we're going to say it's missing. But still, that's valuable information.
Yeah, of course.
It should be there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting thing that the system is not perfect, but it's able to pick up 99% of what is kind of valuable to your operations.
Yeah. I mean, it cannot not track the steel beam and say, okay, you put the wrong steel beam at the wrong place. If the steel beam is in place and you don't have like an ID for the steel beam that knows that that's steel beam. So you cannot tell it's like 10 meters off. You just know it's there or it's not there, or maybe 10 centimeters off or 5 or something like that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you also have to simplify the whole thing. Otherwise, if you have kind of all of these variables, it gets too complicated and you don't get the information you need. So we try and simplify everything down to make it as kind of as intuitive as possible, to make sure that within kind of 4 or 5 clicks, you get the information that you need.
Yeah. And you're using just the regular BIM model that's present anyway. So the architects or engineers or whoever create the BIM model, and you just, let's say, show the structural elements. And if you are in the building of structural elements, you can compare the reality from the 3D point cloud to the structural elements in the BIM model.
Exactly. You have all this information already. You're probably building off the BIM in some way. All we're doing is comparing what you intended to build to what has actually been built in reality. Yeah. And then the cool thing is that you're not just doing that for one single moment. You're also tracking that over time. So you have percentage complete, and you can see what has been the change between X and Y time, so that you can now track progress and make sure that you're actually meeting the schedule that you've decided upon.
Yeah, so you're not only tracking is the right element in the right place, but is it in time, all right? And then you can make predictions on the schedule and just tell, okay, we are now 2 days late with this, and then we end up 2 weeks later or whatever.
Exactly. But then you also have, you touched upon a really nice point, that we're getting a lot of information from the BIM file. So within the BIM, the 3D is really not the focus of what a BIM file is. It's all the information and metadata that's going into those elements. So you also know what subcontractor is working on what. It's all been divided up. So if there are any issues, and there are consistent issues, it means that you can start making decisions based on data and not opinions. So for example, we worked on a couple of projects within the same company, and they realized that the concrete subcontractor was making consistently the same errors.
Okay.
And you wouldn't have been able to pick out that trend without having that overview of how it was actually working. So they use that information to, not as a stick to beat the subcontractor, but to have a conversation and say, look, this is coming up a bit more than we would probably be comfortable with. Can you change the way that you're working here? They said, yeah, you're right. And ultimately, both parties come out a winner there, because they're using better information to make better decisions, to be able to reduce the chances that they have to come back in like 9 months to rectify the work that they're doing.
I mean, that's the common problem in the construction industry. I think it's somebody, I mean, that's human to make mistakes, and something is going wrong and nobody's really recognizing it. And then of course at some point you'll see it, and then they have to come back. It's going to get fights over it, whose responsibility was it. And I mean, if you can have a solution in the moment where it's happening, I mean, it's good for everybody, because everybody knows, okay, we don't have trouble afterwards, right?
The longer the issue goes undiscovered, the more dangerous and the more expensive it becomes to fix.
Yeah.
I think it's like 3 or 4 times, for 1 month, it's like 3 or 4 times more expensive, something like this. And that's not even taking into account the fact that it's going to disrupt your schedule, it's going to disrupt the workflows you already have in place, and then your team is not actually going to be able to focus on what they should be doing, which is managing the project.
Yeah. And can you, I mean, it's structural elements is one thing. Can you also like have information about like pipes and stuff like that? So the later stages of building?
So we can do pretty much everything that's been modeled within the BIM file. So if it's in there, we can probably measure it. And I would say one of the places where we deliver the most value is going to be MEP, like installations like this. The more complex it is, the more value we can deliver. So something that would take months for a human being to review manually, we can do in hours. And to be able to get that information incrementally, kind of every day or every week or every month, is super valuable.
And I mean, buildings are getting more and more complex with all the techniques and stuff that's built in. So I think that's one thing that's getting even more complicated in the future than it is right now.
And we're asking people to, all the stresses and strains that are coming onto the building industry, like we have to be more efficient, we have to have higher quality, less time, all of these things, all this pressure, but we're designing digitally, but we're still constructing manually, and people make mistakes. We're only human. And it's kind of unfair to expect people to be anything other than human, to be honest. So I think tools like this, it's not to replace human beings, it's nothing like that. It's giving them a fair chance to do their job properly.
That's one thing. So I'm a structural engineer, and one thing was we are making like 3D models of rebar and everything, and then we have to put it on a 2D paper, right? And put position numbers on every steel rebar, and they have to again translate it into reality and think about, okay, this beam has to go there, which was kind of weird for me, to go this process completely like 3D, digital, everything perfect, and then you just go and print it out on paper, and everything is like it has been like 50 years ago.
But it's such a confusing industry in this way. Like you think, we're a digital industry, everyone can work in 3D, like obviously. And the answer is an absolute no. And you realize that Revit file is going to get turned into like 10,000 paper drawings, which are going to have then red lines drawn all over and all kinds of chaos. But we made a choice within the company that we had to kind of accept some of these things, because otherwise the industry is not going to adopt it. So for example, every single element that we classify, we also automatically generate the 2D section drawings of that element. So you can see where it's supposed to be versus where it actually is in reality in 2D. And it was one of the most popular features that we rolled out. And it was the simplest and most kind of backwards kind of, we're doing all this computer vision, all this machine learning, it's the future of tech. And then ultimately they were like, but can we see it as a 2D drawing?
I mean, people are just used to it, and they know 2D plans for like 50 years, and they are used to it. And I think for most, it's maybe just easier to think in those 2D planes than in a 3D model. I think maybe it's also a generation thing with the younger generation who grew up with more digital and 3D. I think it's getting more easy to adopt also with those things.
I did hear a story from a big general contractor in the UK that they rolled out iPads for site to be able to do the checks, and you just tick box and you go, okay, done. And what they were doing is they were printing out the tick box, and then they were using the iPad to hold the paper.
Awesome. That's how it's going in the construction industry. So you were talking about some projects you already been working in with Scaled Robotics. Is it like let's say like trial project with partners just in kind of like a beta phase, or is it really companies now just buying your product and your service?
So we've moved through the stage where we're doing pilots. We have a couple of companies that were absolutely fantastic, helping us really build the product. Got to kind of give a big shout out to Durvermeer in the Netherlands, Kier in the UK, Afgruppen in Norway, and Alec Construction in the UAE. They were absolutely fantastic for initially testing out our product and helping us to develop it into what it is today. But now we've transitioned into we're a company now. We're still a startup, and our product is definitely not finished, but we are offering the software platform as a service right now to customers all over the world. And we're working in France, the Netherlands, Norway, the US, Canada, UAE, doing some tests in Japan. The UAE, we're kind of all over the place these days.
So I'm from Germany. Did you have projects in Germany?
We have some that were supposed to start this year, but COVID delayed everything, as you can imagine. But I think this year we should be starting one or two projects in Germany.
That's awesome. Do you see like big differences in the construction industry in the different countries? I mean, you yourself coming from UK and working in Italy, in the Netherlands, in Spain, and now with Scaled Robotics, do you see like decisive differences in the construction industry, or is it like more or less the same?
Huge differences between each country. Huge differences. The way, for example, things are done just different projects, but if you take out the project dimension of things, how they use BIM, for example, the UK is pretty good. The Netherlands is really good. Norway is kind of relatively good, but it's never quite what you would kind of expect. Like there's a lot of noise. People telling you they're BIM level 5 or whatever. Like, but they're really kind of like they're just barely using it. Germany is probably, I hate to say it, has been the one with probably the lowest BIM adoption.
That's what I was going to also say, that in my opinion, or what I've heard, especially from the UK, that there's like, I don't know, centuries between what we are doing in Germany and what the UK is doing, right?
I think the mandate from the government made a huge difference. Like it just forced companies.
When did you have it in the UK?
It's been a long time. I don't know the exact date. Maybe it was like 2018, maybe before. Maybe it was before. But the fact that they mandated that use for government projects, it just forced companies, general contractors, to get on board. Like they had no choice.
I think that's what's coming in Germany right now. To like governmental projects need to use BIM.
Really?
I think so. I'm not very familiar with it, but I think it's coming right now. But then it takes time, right, until they really work with it.
I mean, yes, there's a whole bunch of like the software Autodesk has put out. Like, let's be honest, they give you a service from zero to the moment where you're just doing concept design to architectural and structural to managing the project, and now even the post project when you're putting all the stuff for asset management in place. But if you don't train your workforce in a new way of thinking and working, it doesn't matter what technology is out there. And what I've seen is, if there's no really big push or lever or driving force for it, it never happens. And for us, it's super important. Our growth is really linked to the growth of
course, And I think, at least in Germany, we have lots of very small companies, right? I mean, there are big building companies, but in the end, the subcontractors and so on, it's maybe like 3, 4, 5 people companies with maybe even the boss of the company was a mason himself and just started a company. And I mean, they are not very familiar with all the digital stuff, and they maybe even don't like doing all the work with the computer and so on. And I think they'll start changing if somebody tells them to change. There's I think for many companies there's no other way than that. Of course, there's the young generation, maybe they are starting companies or taking over companies from family or whatever and innovate a little bit. But as you said, I think it needs the pressure from top to get it in all layers.
I think if the companies don't see that they're losing work because of this, they're never going to change. But I also I can't blame the industry. I mean, if you're on like a 1-2, I think in the UK the average profit margin is like 1-2%, something like this. So if every project is either you're losing a little bit of money and maybe you're making more on the other one, or every project is potentially the thing that's going to send you bankrupt. I think construction has the highest rate of bankruptcies in any industry. So why would you take a risk by investing in a new technology when that might be the thing that screws you over so much that like implementing that new process that you literally go bankrupt or lose all the profit. So I mean, obviously I disagree, but I can see why there's that hesitancy to change.
I mean, in contrary, with like solutions you offer, it's going the other way, because then they are getting more efficient and their margins maybe increase and it's getting better for them. But of course, the starting point to invest and learn something new is costing them the money in the first place. So it's a very hard step to take, I think.
This is honestly where I spend a lot of my time for the company, working out what are the things that they need to feel comfortable? Like, how do they trust us? And trust is a function of time and consistency.
Yeah.
So how can I come? They look at me and they think, okay, he's talking about computer vision and machine learning, and I'm a guy like trudging through the mud. Like, what is this nonsense? So you have to prove to them that you can actually deliver value on day one. And if you can't prove that, then it's just never going to happen. Like, you're never going to have that conversation. And we're not considering the value we deliver. We're not expensive, but it's not an insignificant amount of of money every month. So overcoming that hesitancy within the industry is it's quite difficult. It's fun. It's a fun challenge, but it's definitely not easy.
Yeah. So did the COVID pandemic like affect your business? Or I mean, you told that some projects were delayed, of course, but like I talked to other companies that offer like digital solutions, and they even had a positive effect because people like they now believe that things are possible doing online digital, which they thought they'll never do online or whatever because they were just forced to do it. So how did it affect your business?
Some of the conversations that we had before the pandemic were, let's say, conversations went from, oh, this sounds like a nice luxury, this sounds like, oh, it's something interesting, to, okay, a lot of the things that they weren't comfortable with, they're now comfortable with, and it's a totally different conversation. So the fact that it's in the cloud, that's actually a benefit now. Before they were obsessed with having everything
local
on the PC. Like everything had to be local, which is crazy. And now cloud, completely fine. Everyone's on board with that. So I think it's completely changed the industry's perspective on things, and I don't think that's going away after this pandemic. I think it's completely changed the industry's look on digital processes. It's accelerated us by a couple of years for sure.
Yeah. So that's helping your business growing, but I think, as you said, right, the BIM wave is what you're on. What's your future's main thing is, right? That BIM is going to be established in all countries and all aspects of the projects, and then like I mean everybody needs something that you're offering, because BIM models are fine if they exist, but it doesn't help if you can compare it to what's happening in reality.
Exactly. I mean, if you think on the average project that the BIM that you hand over to your client at the end of the project accurately reflects the reality of the project, then you are very, very naive. So yeah, we're definitely tied into that. And it's one of the reasons we have this partnership with Autodesk, that we're working very closely with them, because the more that we can tap into those BIM workflows, whether it be automating redline drawings or whatever it is, the more value we're going to deliver to construction companies. And you can kind of see the inevitable curve that BIM is just going to be, it's just going to be the way things are done. Like maybe 5 years ago, the idea of a single family house being done in Revit would have been like madness to me. And now we have customers that are delivering those scale of projects in BIM. So it's changing for sure, and the quality of it is changing as well.
I mean, if you do like, let's say a weekly scan of the whole building, then afterwards in your BIM model you don't only have the final state, but you also have all the states in between. So I don't know, if you have a water leak or whatever, you can just go back to that state where the water pipes are, and then just perfectly where they are. And maybe you can even go with a 3D tablet or whatever and just see it right through the wall actually.
This is a huge thing for litigation and for risk on a project. You can verify that work was done, it was done to this quality, everything looked fine, it was ticked off by all parties. Maybe it's just one of those things and the pipe burst, who knows? Or maybe someone was to fault and they didn't actually build it according to what they said that they would build. And you see these like weird L and S. I mean, you see crazy stuff in pipes where they see that there's something in the way. So they're like, oh, no problem. We just do like a figure of 8 around it. And you can hold people to account for the work that they do.
Because you have just the documentary of all the work's been done in the whole process of building the structure. We
found out through one of our clients that for every one of these pieces of litigation, of one of these claims, that even if you get the subcontractor to pay for that, because let's say they are culpable for it, you recover 40% of the cost is actually the rework or the actual cost of the deviation. But then 60% of that is actually the cost is just in the legal fees, people that have to organize all this information. Like you have well-trained, experienced site managers that have to scroll through their emails, putting together all of this nonsense. And then maybe they even end up in court and they have to spend a day on a stand saying, I don't remember.
Yeah, and there was this email and that email and
And it's exhausting. So I think that kind of friction within the industry will free people up again to do what they're supposed to be doing and not scrambling over these kinds of issues.
Yeah. So we've been already talking about it, but what do you see as one of the main issues or the main like specialties construction industry has?
What do you mean specialties?
Like a special issue that's in the construction industry you don't have in other industries.
I think the biggest, most interesting challenge is that it's a manufacturing industry. We are manufacturing a product for users, and we always seem to forget that we're a manufacturing industry. We seem to put ourselves in this other category, but we are building a product. And we should think of it as a manufacturing industry in that way. But it's not the same as other manufacturing industries, because instead of the object that's being produced passing through the factory passes through the object.
Yeah, and you're building it just one time. The most products are on a mass production, and you can optimize it for a very long time until it's perfect and then go into mass production. And here we just build it one time and it has to be perfect.
And everything is unique, and we seem to make the same mistakes continuously. And one of the best stories I heard about this from a rival podcast like Katera.
That's fine.
I have to admit, I'm a big fan of Katera. I think what they're doing is amazing. Or I think it's in the right direction for sure. It's super brave. I love it. But they made this really good point that the windows that were being cut, they looked at I don't remember the exact figures, but they looked at the wastage when they were cutting out the glass for windows, and it was like 30% waste. But you compare that to like the phone industry, where it's like 2% waste cutting the glass out. And this guy that had come from the tech industries or from manufacturing of consumer goods was like, this is ridiculous amounts of inefficiency. And he started digging through, and he found out that it was just that the guy that was producing the glass windows was not speaking to the architect. So the architect did not know that if you change the size of the window by X%, you could get more glass to cut out and it would be more efficient. So we seem to, the huge problem is that we operate in silos. So we don't have one supply chain, and everyone says that we're not an optimized industry, but we are very well optimized. We're just optimized within our silos that don't speak to each other. That creates this like grand kind of inefficiency.
If every silo is optimized in itself, that's fine for it, but overall it leads to a very inefficient process. That's a nice story. I never thought about it, but it absolutely makes sense. That I never came to the idea that the guy that actually is making the windows needs to talk about the architecture, about the size the glass comes from, right? But makes sense. Totally makes sense.
So
but
But then you think, why did we not think about this before? And then you think, why did SoftBank have to invest like $2 billion into Katera? So that we could figure out this quite simple leap of logic.
Then sometimes it just needs people from other industries coming in and seeing that and thinking, what the hell? In other industries it works with 2%. Why do we need 30% here? And if it's like very all the people are in construction for all their life and don't go right and left, it's hard to tell, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's come a little bit to the future now. What's the plan of Scaled Robotics for the future? So, I mean, the beginning with the project from university was actually building stuff with robots. Now it's more like scanning and going with the BIM models, but also having the robot. Are there plans to increase the work with the robots, or what's the idea for the next time?
I think the robot plays a really important role in controlling the way we capture data on the construction site. I do not believe that there is one magic solution to capturing data on a construction site. It's about the right tool for the right job, but we will be working more on how the robot is perceiving the world, how it's navigating, and improving upon that. That's an important technology stack for further developments in the future if we want to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
I think the core of what we're doing as a company right now is we're solving this problem that, and I was speaking to some guys at Morgan Sindel about this, that we are a digital industry, like 100% we are clawing our way. We are definitely a digital industry, but we're not a data industry yet. And there is a whole, we're making decisions based on experience.
Yeah.
And maybe your site managers or your guys in the team have like 100 years of collective experience, but that's not really good. Other industries don't work that way. We don't make decisions based on data. So I think the core of what we're trying to do, and the robot is just a tool for that, is to move into the industry from a digital industry to a really a data industry. It's making decisions based on real data to be able to improve processes. Because if you can't measure something, you cannot manage it. And if you don't objectively understand a process, then you're never going to improve it.
Yeah.
So I think that's really where we're focusing our energies at the moment.
Okay, just so, of course, if you have lots of projects, I mean, there are lots of building projects all over the world. And if you take all the learnings from all the sites and all the projects and put them together, it's way easier and to really optimize it and don't make the same mistakes all the time. Then, of course, I mean, one site manager has his way, but he can still do the same mistake every time because he just thinks it's the right way, right?
Exactly. Or maybe they don't see the pattern. Like the cool thing about big data and machine learning is it just gives you as a human being a different scale and perspective on things that you wouldn't have had before. Instead of you as like an MD of a GC, you can, instead of just looking at like single projects, you can start to look at the patterns that are going across your entire organization. And then maybe you need to make changes, but it's really down to you to be able to make those decisions of better data.
So you're just going to try to get more data, and then having this data, you can do lots of different stuff with it, right? Knowing the patterns and everything. So, and the like scaling in going international, you already are very international, but you're going to push that further.
So right now, the robot is being piloted in Europe. We've been completely held back by COVID on this. So that's not a product we're offering, but the software platform is a product which we are now offering. So, I mean, if anyone listening to this podcast is interested in working with us, we'd love to hear from you. But really, it's about expanding the amount of projects and the different kinds of projects that we're working on with the platform.
Yeah. So what's your guess on the future of construction industry? How's the process going on? How long will it take to really transform into this digital industry where we have data and stuff?
I definitely wouldn't put any dates on things because every time I've ever done this, it's been proven to be wrong.
Yeah, but just the. Do you think it? I mean, you said it's accelerated through COVID and stuff like that. Do you think it's the like making BIM mandatory will accelerate it further, or is it just slowing down again and taking more time?
No, I think year on year you're going to see like compounded growth for this. I think it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think it's going to be kind of this flywheel effect where year on year out, all of the gains that you're getting are just going to push you forward and forward and forward. Yeah. I don't think it's as clear cut as, oh, we just adopted BIM. No, it's also about the experience of the people, because it's not just the software, it's a way of working. It's a mindset from the guys on site, and you have to get everyone to to buy into that.
Yeah.
But I think that's growing year in, year out. It's like this year, honestly, is a totally, when we first started the company, it's a totally different proposition to then. Like it's just not even the same conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm quite optimistic about new tools and technologies being rolled out.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of very interesting startups and companies that are innovating the industry, which I didn't see like 5-10 years ago. I think that's also really accelerating, that there are young people wanting to innovate in the construction industry.
People are open to it. Like there's some amazing companies out there. Like there's Okibo in Israel that's done this wall plastering robot.
Yeah.
Like we're living in a time where there are autonomous wall plastering robots.
Yeah.
It's something out of science fiction. It's incredible. It's really, I'm really optimistic over the next 10 years. I'm so confident that we're going to have real autonomous robots on site doing jobs physically and not just software games.
Yeah.
We're going to see real new physical tools within the industry for sure.
Yeah, I think that's true. Okay, that's a nice point to end. One question I'd like to ask at the end always is if you have any advice or tips for maybe students or people that are going to start a company, just from your experience, that for one that have gone the path of studying and then growing a company. Have you any advice?
Maybe one is about risk. That we as human beings, I think we're really terrible at calculating risk. So if you decide to start a company and it takes you 6 months, 12 months, you're working part-time and you're trying to push things together, and you know what? If it doesn't work out, it's quite likely that you're going to be completely fine and you'll just get on with your life and no harm, no foul. It's not the huge risk that you think it is, but the upside is massive. And even if it fails, the skills that you will learn along the way are probably going to be incredibly valuable to you. So don't be too worried about the risk factor. It's okay to take a risk and you will grow from it. And I'm glad that I took that piece of advice when I was younger.
Yeah.
Also, it is really hard work. If you're not willing to put your entire heart and soul into it, it's probably not going to be successful, because honestly, everything really is kind of against you.
Yeah.
You will have to learn a lot of things that you didn't expect you had to learn. But we live in this amazing internet era where it's really all out there. Like that information is there. You can find it. And then don't be afraid to ask questions from people. There are people that have done this before and are probably quite willing to give you advice. And in the beginning, when we were starting this company, I would just reach out to people and be like, I think what you did is cool. Do you want to be friends? Have you got any advice? And it's quite likely that they will respond back and they will be positive.
And you're building a network with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. People are nice. Yeah. They'll probably give you advice and it will probably be good. Yeah. And then just make sure you listen to it.
Yeah, that's a hard point, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially if the younger you are, the more risk you can take. I think that's one thing that's very wrong taken, that people are, when they are like 20, 25, they think they have to have figured out everything and what they will be doing the rest of their life. I think it's the other way. The younger you are, the more risk you can take, and then you'll be fine, like you said.
I think people are just overly worried about following a specific path that they think society wants them to take.
Yeah, and parents maybe.
Yeah, also, I mean, definitely parents. Yeah. Definitely parents. I was lucky my parents were they were very supportive. Yeah. Even if I'm not sure they understood quite what I was doing, but they were quite supportive.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Stuart. I appreciate taking the time for this. Thank you very much.
Really, my pleasure.
Thank you.